Alright guys, Mig-29 here. I'm going to switch out to the Termez skin to give myself a little bit of ability to hide. I've got some weapons loadouts, and the weapon loadouts are as follows. I've got a fuel tank, 2 ETs, 2 R-77s, and 2 R-73s. These are all fire and forget weapons that you can just launch off. Let's wait for the weapon loadouts to come in, and then we'll start up the engine and start taxiing. The Mig-29 is a fairly straightforward plane. You do the Shift L to power up the electronics, load up your weapons, and adjust your flares if you want flares and chaff balanced out. I like to have more chaff on the PvP servers because I'm more likely to experience a Fox 3 launch, which is radar guided. And yeah, it's pretty easy. You don't need to do the nose wheel steering. It's automatically set up, so you can just adjust your steering as required. There we go. We've got weapons loaded. And let's get the engine started here. One thing that you are missing compared to an Su-27 is you have no data link. So normally you would have data link here, but you don't. It just replicates whatever you're seeing on your main screen. A little bit of a challenge, but that's okay. First, the right engine gets started. That little green light there is identifying that the right engine has started. If we take a look outside of our plane, as you can see on the right side of the engine, the secondary air intake has opened up, and that's used for the airplane to make sure it doesn't ingest any ground objects when the engine is running when you're on the ground. So the main intake has closed, and the secondary intake is basically just so that rocks don't get sucked into the engine while you're taxiing, because the airplane is really low on the ground and it's meant to take off from pretty much any runway where there might be clutter, rocks, dust, or whatever other junk there is that could damage the compressor blades. We've got an extra fuel tanks, and we are going to be ready for takeoff in a few moments here. So let's do that. Let's taxi out to the runway and execute a takeoff. A little bit of thrust. And let's roll around here. A couple of things to keep in mind when you're taking off. Your takeoff speed is approximately 270 or so. That's 270 kilometers an hour. When you're loaded up with a lot of fuel and with the fuel tank in mid-center, you are going to have some issues, so you will need some runway space to do that. You can take off an afterburner, which works, but don't stay in afterburner a long time, because then you're going to experience some issues as well. So let's just taxi up here, hit the brakes. Make a turn, and let's do a takeoff here real quick in the Mig-29. So lined up, I'm going to hold down the wheel brakes, bring my thrust up to 100, and release. I find that the plane does do a little bit of weird steering on the ground if the nose wheel isn't locked, so I'm just compensating with my yaw. 250, 260, 270, 280. Pull back on the stick. Up in the air. And I can bring up the landing gear. Alright, so landing gear is up. And we are in the air. The interesting thing that I found about this plane is at speed, it will tend to pitch down. So press Control Enter to bring up your trim settings. And you can see it on the side there. And what you do is you bring your trim, which will compensate for the nose pitching all the way to the bottom. And just to show you that, if I reset the trim, as you can see, the plane just starts pitching by itself automatically down. So I'm pulling up right now, gonna let go of the stick, and as you can see, the plane is pitching itself down. So to compensate that, move your trim slowly downwards until you stop pitching down. So as you can see right there, by doing that, the trim has leveled out. Alright, another thing to keep in mind is your fuel usage. It's tracked right above your fuel tank levels right here. So right now I've got about 470 kilometers range, and if I were to throw this into afterburner, the number will actually update and tell me that I'm down to 300 kilometers range. If I continue going in full afterburner here for a few minutes, once my fuel level drops below 4,500, what will happen is my external tank will be empty and I can drop it. So let's burn through that fuel real quick. As you can see, the plane just sucks up the fuel like no tomorrow. But as soon as you get a little bit of altitude, as soon as you go about 3,000 meters, that's about 9,000 feet, the fuel consumption gets a lot more efficient. So let's get back down to the deck. And you need to be at a certain speed to drop your fuel tank. You cannot drop it at an extreme speed. So you need to cut back. Fuel tank is still attached. Leveling out. And there goes the fuel tank. So there you have it.